All right, I need candidates from District 4 up here in 5 minutes. 5 minutes, please. 5 minutes.
Oh, that would help. Yes. Can you hear me now? I feel like a Verizon guy. Can you hear me now? It works. Yes. Okay, perfect. Verizon guy. And then do we just turn it off? Yeah.
Can you hear me? That's too loud. How about here?
Well, thank you. I do try to impress when I can. What are you doing on the third? Allowed bank events for District 4.
Well, I'm gonna cheat.
Oh, that's perfect. You're gonna cheat? Shh. Why would know you're cheating candidates?
Just when it comes to
Yeah, it's okay. It's what enables you to take part in voting. That's what matters. Because one thing I want to do is make EVs more affordable. Mm-hmm. Yes. 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 I mean, they are filming it. How do we get the footage? Google Plus. Because this will be great. And if I put it all sitting together, well, it could be symmetrical. Perfect. Yes. Where there's a will, there's a camera. It's not an iPhone, but we can excuse you. Because you know what? It's an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
That's what I hear.
And Android makes you more robotic by the day. No pun intended. Yes.
You might.
Oh, do you want to do some B footage? Do you want to do some B footage? Just do some panning? Yeah. Yes.
I've done my promotional photos.
Yes.
I see, and I'm really bad about that. I gotta start.
Digital content is everything these days, especially to reach the YouTubers, users. Yes. Oh wow.
I've worked with her for 20 years.
All right. Thank you so much for attending our first District 4 candidate forum at PSU, Smith Memorial Student Union. I'm Darrell Kinsey Bay. I'm your moderator. I'm the co-founder of the BIPOC Rising Healing Center, which is the co-host of this event. I'm a youth advocate for REAP, and I am running for mayor for the city of Portland. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. So without further ado, we're going to get into the questions. I'm going to give you the layout of how we're going to orchestrate everything. We have our volunteer who's going to give a 30-second time check and then a 10-second time check. And that volunteer is in the center of the front row. And when we do the first question, we're going to be including the candidate's introduction about themselves, such as their name, some of their policies, and their goals for the city, in addition to the question. It's a little kind of tight, but we're going to make it happen. All right? All right, let's get it started. I'm going to move over here. Don't mind me. All right, here we go. What does treating someone with dignity mean to you? How will you ensure that the most vulnerable in our community are treated with dignity as we navigate getting everyone housed? So we're going to start with Sarah Silky at the far end over there, and then we're going to bring it on to her right.
All right. Well, thank you, Darrell, and thank you, Jeremy, so much for organizing this. So I'm going to get right to it. My name is Sarah Silky. I am a working mom raising 3 kids in Southwest Portland with my husband. I grew up in Portland, the oldest of 6 kids. My parents were not wealthy. I experienced the instability of poverty. I was lucky to do well academically and went into engineering, so I now have a stable job. I'm a union steward and environmental engineer protecting our drinking water, and I'm running for city council because we need a climate champion. We need somebody who understands how the city works, and we need somebody who will encourage transparency and making it so that our citizens are more heard and engaged in their government. But dignity. When I think about dignity, I think about respect. I think about Aretha Franklin's inspiring song, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. And I think it's, it's hard to put a hard definition on it, but it's treating each other as independent human beings rather than tools or fools, sheep or commodities. We all know when we're not being treated with dignity and respect, when we're treated as less than, when we're paid less money for doing the same work. The more important thing is what we can do to treat people with dignity. For housing, it's got to start with giving everybody a safe place to sleep and store their belongings. Having a locked door is part of real housing. I can commit to you to bring a new era of open conversations so that the voters are treated with respect and our whole community can grow. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Bob Weinstein. I just want to note that I'm wearing my hat because the lights are very bright and I couldn't see you otherwise. I'm running for city council for a number of reasons. First of all, a little bit of background. After graduating with a master's in special ed from University of Oregon, I went to Alaska as a traveling special education teacher to remote schools, eventually becoming the superintendent of schools. And after that, I ran for city council in Ketchikan, large city in Alaska, small compared to Portland or even my immediate neighborhood. But I was on the city council for 6 years. And then I ran for mayor, and I was mayor for 12 years. So I'm running because I think I can help with my experience and leadership skills, get the new council to hit the ground running. In terms of the question and treating people with dignity and what does dignity mean? Well, from my perspective, dignity means recognizing the inherent worth of every individual, regardless of their circumstances. And for our unhoused neighbors, that means approaching them as valued community members deserving of support and understanding. As a council member, I will work with others to engage directly with unhoused individuals to understand their needs, promote public education to reduce stigma and foster empathy, collaborate with community organizations and experts to help get people off the streets, into shelter, into transitional housing with whatever wraparound mental health and or drug addiction services people might need. And finally, I will advocate for increased mental health and addiction services.
All right, I'm Eli Arnold, and I'm a Selwood resident. I've kind of had my exposure to the crises that we're dealing with working as a police officer, and so this stuff's it's very personal. It's part of my everyday life. And so when we talk about homeless people in my house, like my family members know homeless people by name because it's the thing we talk about at our dinner table. So I think there's two levels to this. One is the institutional level. And I think caring for people and treating them with dignity means realistically addressing their issues. And I think we've got kind of like a public disaster type crisis where we got wounded people laying all over the city. And in a disaster situation, we would never just leave people there after the hospital beds filled up and say, we'll get back to you later. Right? We would scoop them up, we would take them, we would do triage. And so I think doing that is truly caring in the moment for them until we get the perfect solution. Personally, it is treating everybody like their person, and it's not just seeing them from the highway or at a distance, but being willing to engage in the problem up close. I can tell you one person I know until he passed away this year, actually, there's a homeless man downtown named Ray. Ray went in and out of housing many times, and he was a guy I dealt with for years. And Ray was a good person. Ray had some real difficulties, both with drugs and with some mental health problems. But, if you would give Ray 10, 15 minutes when he was spiraling and, recognize his grievances and that he had been wronged, he would usually be able to pull out of that spiral. And just being willing to take that time makes a big difference. And actually, for probably the last year of his life, my wife and Ray were both huge record fans. And so I delivered periodic records to Ray downtown. And, he was a real person to me. And I think we got to hit both levels if we're really going to take care of people.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeremy Bosley Smith. I'm a downtown resident, husband, parent, and capital projects and construction manager here at Portland State. I'm in this race to build out the most robust social safety net in our nation while still being a good steward of the taxpayer dollar. So for what treating someone with dignity means to me, I think that you get into politics, or you should, and I'm in this race because I genuinely love people. I've never met a stranger in my life, and I know that to solve the issues that we're currently facing, that we have to see people that are unhoused right now, and furthermore, everyone in our community as an extension of ourselves. I think in this country, we really tout individuality, and that's great. But I think sometimes that can leave us cold, broken, and alone. And so to treat someone with dignity, to me, means that everyone's basic needs are met. Everyone has clean drinking water, healthy food to eat, adequate and affordable housing, and comprehensive health care. So in 2018, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder after a manic episode. I was houseless for a summer and was disoriented and scared. I can definitely relate to people all over Portland that are experiencing similar issues right now. I know what it's like to be that vulnerable person. And so I know that it took a lot of time, it took a lot of care, took a lot of energy. And I think that we owe it to everyone in the city to put in that time, put in that care, put in that energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. My name is Andrew Voltavine. I'm a queer and non-binary climate activist running for office. I moved to Portland 10 years ago, and I have founded a eco-friendly co-op and also helped found a local nonprofit here in Portland. I'm a member of the neighborhood emergency team and advocating for an expanded budget for Portland's Bureau of Emergency Management so we can withstand this Cascadia earthquake we have upcoming. I'm also really interested in collaborating with our indigenous tribes, and I'm one of the only candidates not raising money on purpose because I want to show that you don't need money to run for politics, and you don't need to be asking donations from people who can't afford food or rent. In terms of providing people with dignity, I think what's really important to me is making sure that they're participating in their own definition of success, and that you're maximizing agency for the people that you're working with. And so my definition of success might not be someone else's definition of success, and we need to help them move along in the positive changes that are positive for them and not our preconceived notions of that. I think also we need to recognize that we all need to contribute to the crisis that we have going on with the houseless community. And part of that is educating the housed population that these solutions take time and we have to implement them thoughtfully. And so we can't be, for instance, sweeping the houseless community on a weekly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, because that prevents these people from receiving the services and from being found by the people who have services. So we need to be kind, we need to be patient, and we need to educate the public that these things are going to take time, and the sweeps are only making this crisis last longer. Thank you.
Just going to do a quick housekeeping. We're going to have Moses start so we can keep the microphone on that end. Thank you.
Testing. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Moses Ross. I'm a 30-year plus resident of Portland. I have been a single father for the last 19 years. She turns 20 here next month. And for the last 8 years, I have been the chair of the Multnomah Neighborhood Association. And the Neighborhood Association is a wonderful example of how we have to treat all of our neighbors with dignity and respect. Dignity can be sifted down to a very simple phrase: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so we have a situation here with the city of Portland right now and our leadership right now, where those fundamental precepts of dignity and respect for all citizens is at a real crossroads. It's being taxed right now, if you will, because we have folks that are getting angry at seeing this, the addiction crisis and how it's interpreted out onto our streets, and people are getting frustrated. But it's really easy to demonize the other, and so this idea of being afraid of the blue tarp is slowly but surely whittling away at that sense of dignity that we hold for all citizens of the city of Portland. It's up to us as leaders for the city of Portland to reestablish that sense of dignity and respect to all citizens of the city of Portland. How do we do that? Well, let me tell you, we do that by treating them fundamentally with the precepts of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's how we solve the houseless crisis. We shift our mindset and we remember the golden rule. So when I am your city councilor, that will be at my forefront, and I will treat all of the citizens of Portland with the respect and the dignity that they are due.
Oh, okay. Is the mic on? Okay, well. Okay, my name is Michael Trimble. I'm running for District 4 City Council. I want to thank Jarrell and Jeremy for organizing this event. It's always good seeing other candidates and being able to commingle. As you can see, I don't have any arms. I was born like that. And I have fought from day one for dignity and autonomy. I've been discriminated against. I've been fired because of my disability. And I know first foot what it's like to have to fight for one. And one of the things I'm here for is a renter's candidate. I am a queer, non-alcoholic, drug-free, under 40 candidate who wants to make housing the top priority. I believe that housing is a human right, not a commodity, not for a luxury or for profit. It is a human right. And I want to make sure that by the end of our first year, we have everybody living in a tent housed, whether that be in a shelter, mental health, sobering center, something. But we need to get these people off of the streets. It is doable, but we need candidates like me who will never be caught sitting on their hands doing nothing, because we need to really get the gumption going. I also believe that you should be able to work where you live. Too many people I speak with, they work in downtown Portland, but they have to live in Milwaukee, Clackamas, Vancouver, and that is not right. Why can't we live where we work? And again, it all comes down to affordable housing. Affordable housing is the resolution for houselessness. And by getting everybody housed, we will be respecting their dignity, their autonomy. I believe that people should be able to work jobs that pay bills, not paying minimum wage. And I encourage you to go to my website at iamwithmichael.com. And thank you for coming.
All right. Is this thing on? My name is Mitch Green. I'm an Army veteran. I'm a first-generation college student. I grew up in this town. I'm also an economist, but don't hold that against me. Some of us are good. And I'm running because, like, I think to solve our issues, we need a trickle-up approach to economic abundance in this city, and so that's what I bring to the table. But I want to talk about dignity here and use most of my time for that. I think we need to start by recognizing that treating people with dignity includes how you treat them when they're not in the room, right? So with that kind of framing in mind, we can bring to the fore this idea that dignity is not just an interpersonal or transactional affair. It's how we create space for people in our communities so they can live dignified lives as a matter of right. Okay, so simply put, how we afford folks dignity is itself a structural issue. It's an institutional issue. And that means we need to build those institutions to enable everyone to participate in the economic and civic life of our city. So, we can't afford people dignity when we shut them out of the democratic process because they can't afford to write a big check to get time with their city councilors. Or when we fail to invest in the infrastructure that makes it possible for people of all abilities, ethnicities, and class status to thrive. So to get a little more concrete here, if we're talking about things like dignity with regards to our vulnerable houseless neighbors, what does it say when our elected leaders at all levels of government convene panels about livability and recovery of downtown, and we don't invite our most vulnerable downtown residents into that conversation? And so it reminds me of this early on conversation in town hall that I went to, hosted by Rosehaven, where you had Street Roots, you had Ground Score Association, you had Afro Village PDX, you had Milk Crate Collective there, centering those people. And so I think if you vote for me for city council, I'll make sure that our folks have true dignity that crosses those institutional lines. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Freeman. I live in Multnomah Village with my partner and our 2 kids. I'm a government transition and community safety specialist. Before coming to work for the city on community safety, I spent 10 years working and living overseas in places like Afghanistan, Syria, and Nigeria, helping them navigate government transitions. And that's the reason why I'm running this year at this time, is because I'm so excited about the government transition that Portland is in the middle of. And I want to be a part of delivering for residents what they want when they voted for charter reform. In terms of dignity, so I volunteer with an outreach group in my neighborhood that goes out and does outreach to people living outside in Southwest Portland. I was just out earlier this week, and our first stop on the trip was to deliver a tent to Hank and Sarah. And we went there to deliver a tent to them, but then I ended up just talking to Sarah for about 15 minutes. And I left that interaction with the realization that the tent was the reason we went, but the conversation was the value of the visit. And it seems too simple to be true and yet too obvious not to be. But treating someone with dignity is engaging with them as a human. And Andrea and Mitch have both brought this up as well. I have someone on my campaign team, and the impressions of houseless services by people who are unhoused, and especially those who refuse. You were the recipient of services, you were no longer had the right to help design them, that beggars can't be choosers. And so I 100% agree that we need services in the design of those services. What are the shelters that work for them? What's the housing that works for them? Do they need to bring their pet? Low barrier? We need to involve people who need services in the process of designing them. Thank you.
Hi. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you, Darrell, for hosting. Glad the PSU is able to allow us into their home. And thank you, Jeremy, for bringing us all together. I think it's a really good opportunity to see so many candidates here and people in the community, because this is an opportunity for you all to get to know us and us to share what we're about. But I'm Mike DiNapoli. I'm born and raised in Portland, small business owner. I'm a parent and a grandparent. I'm a friend and a neighbor, and part of the reason that the reason I'm running for city council is I deeply believe and love the Rose City. I know that we have a lot of positive things to offer, but we got a lot of work to do. And with this new form of government and charter reform, much like Lisa, and everyone here, I think we're all very much excited about this new chapter of what Portland's bringing and what we're all going to be bringing to the table, because it's a community effort, and we're not operating in a silo here. We're working for all of you and for the people of Portland. But, to answer the question of dignity, I might say a lot of the same things that I'm hearing here, and I'm really happy to hear much of us saying the same thing. Dignity is all about just seeing people as who they are, where they are, and regardless of, opinions, political, ideology, people are humans, and we don't have to agree on everything, but we have to see people for who they are and be willing to engage in conversation. When talking about the folks on the street that are in crisis, it really just, again, comes down to having a relationship, being willing to have a conversation and understand what the circumstances are that have led a person to be in this crisis. As a working class person, I know people who have struggled with homelessness, been homeless, and myself have also been paycheck to paycheck a number of times. And so, for many of us, no matter what tax bracket we're in, it's a house of cards for many of us. And dignity is just having a level of respect for understanding that crisis can happen to anyone, and help comes from the community, and we have to work together to build a stronger society. Thank you.
Awesome. Quick round of applause for that first question. Quick round of applause.
It's all good. It's all good. So apologize for the microphone glitch. We're going to bring that mic to Moses, and we're going to start with Michael Trimble on this question. Trimble. Second question. Since 2000, suicide rates across the nation have steadily increased, and Portland is no exception. What do you think is causing this increase, and what can be done to reverse this trend?
Thank you for that question, Darrell. What is causing it is a whole host of issues. A lot of it is housing. A lot of it is mental health. There are people who are trying to get help, but there simply isn't room or capacity to help them. And we need to open up sobering centers. We need to use a lot of the vacant buildings downtown Portland and transform them into outpatient mental health. We need to help these people. They're begging for us, and we're not helping them. A lot of them are also living paycheck to paycheck. And if you get evicted, you lose a lot of drive to live, because you're not houseless. And so it's multi-combinational. But again, housing is huge, mental health, and we really need to get on the ground and actually help people get back on their feet and help them find work. One of the things I want to do, I know this is not exactly related to the question, but PSU is a good example. What I want to do is make housing part of your tuition. So this way it's covered by your grants, scholarships, because as a student, you're fighting to better yourself by getting education, and you shouldn't have to worry about your housing. And the same applies to every Portlander. Housing is a human right, and if you're housed, you're not going to have a lot of problems that affect people who are committing suicide and whatnot.
I would just want to say I appreciate the theme here, because the fundamental theme of all of these questions is that sense of dignity and that sense of self-respect. And as a single dad to a 19-year-old who had to live through the pandemic was so isolating. And so many of my daughter's friends had challenges, mental health challenges, because of that isolation. And what it really brought home to me was the fact that we are missing the support at the high school level, at the school level. We need stronger school-based mental health services. You know, that's the generation that I worry the most about, is because that's our future. And right now they're just focused solely on their screens and on their smartphones, and they don't have that sense of community. Community helps gets rid of that isolationism, because you feel like you are part of a whole. And for the last 8 years as Multnomah Neighborhood Association chair, the only way that we have been able to get anything done is to become relevant to the community, be a part of our community, give people a way to be involved in our community. And that in turn brings people out of their isolation, brings them together as a part of the overall whole, and to help reestablish, especially here in Portland, reestablish that pride in our community. My whole campaign is based on reestablishing pride in Portland. And it comes down to being proud of where you live. And it comes from the top. It comes from the leadership. That's where it needs to start. But yes, isolation, school-based mental health support services, the city can play a role in this.
Thank you. Yeah, so suicide is a complex issue with many causal factors. So you want to be really, really careful in ascribing causality to it. It's very situational, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about like the correlative factors and the kind of associated things that we can point to that give us policy solutions here. So if you're looking at youth suicide, which by the way is one of the highest leading causes of death for young people in Oregon, it's usually co-indicated with family issues at home. And that's why it's super, super important that you do not cut school funding. It's super, super important that you do not cut parks programs, right? You need third places. You need supportive institutions for young people to go and find safe places. And this is particularly true for BIPOC and queer communities. You need safe places. And you know, we're going to establish a through line for community connection here. If you look at a slightly older demographic, like 25 to 84, then it's the economy, stupid, right? It's economics, generally is the larger predictor. When you lose your job, you lose your house, you start to kind of see this spiral, this kind of like web of crisis spiral out of control, and that can lead to despair and suicide. And of course, there's macro and geopolitical influences there as well. And so that hits home to me, because as a veteran, you know, a combat veteran, you come home and then you see some of your buddies struggling pretty hard. Maybe you've thought about, you know, doing the wrong thing a couple times. And so again, connection with community, it's you know, and finding ways to get out of that isolation. So it's super important to have investments on an economic level that make sure that that we don't have that kind of threat for our folks in that demographic. And then, of course, the highest rates of suicide are seniors, people over the age of 85, and it's isolation that drives that. And so I think running through all of this is we need to be making investments through the municipal budgeting process that create you know, places for people to be in community in a very collaborative sense. Thank you.
So I'm sure that many, if not most, people in the room have been personally impacted by suicide. In 2014, my aunt, my mom's youngest sister, committed suicide after struggling with mental illness for several decades. This is obviously incredibly heartbreaking for our family, and especially my grandparents, who were from a generation that didn't openly talk about or address mental illness. So I think about, what are the things that potentially could have helped my aunt? Many people have already talked about the increase in mental health issues for our young people and our adolescents. We're still trying to figure out what the reasons for all of this are, but certainly social media, bullying, our climate emergency are all playing a role. As a parent of an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old who's about to go into middle school, this terrifies me. So I really appreciate the commentary or the comments on, having safe spaces for our young people who are going through difficult times. Also, the increase in suicides among armed forces veterans like Mitch and Eli. I know many people personally who have really had a hard time with things they saw and did overseas. So making sure that we're supporting our veterans. And lastly, we can't talk about suicide without talking about guns. The prevalence of guns in America and the restrictions on research around gun violence are really alarming. I have worked on gun violence and reducing gun violence in the city of Portland, where we saw really troubling increases from 2019 to 2020. And we saw gun homicides go down in the last 2 years by 20%. But this is just a sliver of gun violence. 79% of gun deaths in Oregon are suicides. And so we have a great resource here at the OHSU PSU School of Public Health. They have a gun violence research prevention program, and we should be working with them to better understand.
Yeah, thank you. This is a good question. And, suicide, there's a lot of causality that goes into it. I think, one of the things that we tend to hear and talk a lot about are people in crisis on the streets and what that leads to. But there are lots of different scenarios that lead people to this. Desperation, trauma, a lack of hope. These are things that I believe are what cause people to struggle with this. But I don't want to say the number wrong, Coop. Is it 988? So 988, if any of us have a friend, a family member, a neighbor that's struggling, you hear things, people, like 988 is a phone number that you can either direct them to or yourself call to get in touch with people who help with managing this crisis and bringing people to a healthier place so that suicide isn't the option. Healthcare is really what I believe is a full stop for it. We need healthcare for everyone. People that are struggling shouldn't have to struggle to get qualified for medical care. It should just be walk in, get the help. We're there for them. We are in a society that has enough money, enough resources to get that done. And, far too often, even people that aren't struggling, getting healthcare and just being able to take care of ourselves, both on a mental health level and a physical health level, are really tough. Affordability is a part of this. If you can't afford to live in the community that you're at, desperation sets in. We don't function well when we're in crisis mode. And, so we need to help those around. I think it stems back to dignity as well, seeing people as humans and where they're at and helping them where they're at. I also think that we're in a better time now than like my parents' generation and generations before us. We are able to have healthier discussions about mental health in a holistic, in a objective way. And I think we need to continue to have those kinds of conversations so we can find solutions to help people in crisis.
Yeah, thank you for what everyone has been saying. I think the mental health services are really important, but I also think that we need to stop thinking about mental health as purely an individual issue. This is also a community level issue. There's a ceiling on how much you as an individual can bolster your own mental health. You need to have support from your community. You need to be able to rely on your community. There need to be community spaces available. You need to feel engaged. And in this time where it's easy to feel helpless and hopeless, we need opportunities for action and participation. That is the antidote for helplessness and hopelessness. So I am really happy about the programs like Party on Portland. It sounds really silly, but just allowing people to do block parties in their neighborhood, meet their neighbors, meet their friends. Those are the types of community efforts that really connect people and bring people together and build those safety nets. Also, the programs like the neighborhood emergency team, so that people can be checking in on their neighbors and see what's going on and know who's having a crisis, or at least like who might have a crisis. And so that there's this building of this community safety net. But also as government officials, we need to be looking at ways to make sure that our city environment is conducive to community. So I'm thinking more walkable spaces. I'm thinking we look at our zoning permits and make sure that we have multi-use zoning, so we can have residential spaces above storefronts and above restaurants, so that we have this more community environment where it's easier to meet friends, it's easier to collaborate with people. I also think, and it's not going to be on the budget this year, but there's been something going around called participatory budgeting, and it allows people to decide a portion of the city's funds and decide how that gets spent in a community-oriented process, which again helps with that feeling of helplessness. When you feel engaged, you feel like your vote matters, you feel like your contribution matters, you're much less likely to take your life into your own hands.
I don't believe that our current societal system is capable of creating a joyous life for us. We have to ask ourselves, are we creating a life worth living? Are we easing the trauma that our systems often cause? And also, how did we get here? Paying insurance, credit card bills, rent. It wasn't always this way, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way anymore. With technological advancements, there's kind of no reason to be working as hard as we do. Wage stagnation continues over the past 60 years, and the working class isn't seeing any of that. Productivity continues to rise at an exponential rate, and we really need to ask ourselves, where is that wealth going? So some of the things that I think of as I'm the oldest in Gen Z, we're just getting to the point where we actually have some say in local government and the ability to actually advocate for ourselves and get a seat at the table. And right now, climate catastrophe, low wages, housing insecurity, these are all things that feel overwhelming, and we really don't know how to overcome at this point. It is inspiring to hear a lot of the ideas that are being thrown out. Actually makes me feel really hopeful that, there's some great ideas, school-based mental health and expanding health services. Thank you for talking about that, Moses and Mitch. I'm running on a renter's bill of rights to include working with the state to institute a rent freeze, or at least a ban on local rent, or overturning the ban on local rent control, so Portland can actually set something that works for our city. Also expanding our urban forests, our park system, creating an aggressive and realistic timeline to cease operations at the critical energy infrastructure hub, and also police demilitarization and accountability. Just here on campus about a month ago, we had Portland Police Bureau come out and they cleared the library and in the protest, and then they stuck around for hours and just beat on us. They beat on faculty, staff, and students. And why would we want to live in this world where we're constantly being beat down? I think we have to create a more resilient city with a hopeful future. And to do that, we really need to ask ourselves, is this life worth living? Let's make a community worth living in. Thanks.
So for about the last 5 years, I've served as a enhanced crisis intervention officer, which means if somebody goes up on one of the bridges and a call comes in, they ask for one of us to go. And so I've spent a lot of time talking to people who are at that moment where they're considering suicide. And some of those conversations can go really long. And I think, what I've seen is that there's some sort of serious unmet need. and that can be mental, it can be physical, it can be economic, but there's a breakdown and they're unable to cope. And ultimately, you know, we need to address those individual things better as a society. But I think underlying all of that is that human beings are resilient when they are in healthy communities. We evolved as social creatures, you know, to live with extended families and friends and social networks. And it's kind of broken down a bit with the way we live now. That's one of the reasons why I came back to Portland, is that I saw what the absence of those things does to people. And I wanted the benefits that accrue from being connected. And, you know, it's easy to break a single strand. It's hard to break a web. So I think anything that we can do to strengthen our community, make our community healthier, helps. And I don't know if you felt it. I know I felt it since I got back in 2015. But this sense of like there's like a fraying, a change in the feel of, you know, our sort of social spaces. It felt very welcoming and healthy to me 9 years ago, and I felt like viscerally this sort of decline of the sense that we were all on the same team, you know, and I think it's just a real underlying issue, and like a lot of people are talking about, anything that we can do to fix that is going to pay dividends with all those more obvious and sort of acute issues that lead people to suicide.
Thank you for the question. Suicide rates in Portland and across the country are of deep concern to me. And I want to put in perspective, as one of the candidates already said, we all know in our own families or families of friends where there have been suicides and or attempted suicides. It's a huge public health issue. And let me put it in perspective a little bit. In 2021, there were 22,000 homicides, big issue. There were 46,000 suicides in the United States. So it has to be of concern. If you're concerned about public safety and public health, you have to be concerned about suicides. I consulted with a friend of mine who is professionally involved in mental health services and asked, what are some of the leading causes of suicide? Well, first of all, it's, again, to put it in perspective, it's one of the leading causes of death for people aged 10 to 34. And a surprise to me, 4 times higher for males than females, 4 times. Why? What are some of the causes? Increased social isolation, exacerbated by social technology, the COVID pandemic, where young people were not in touch with one another, economic instability, financial stress, inadequate mental health services, the ongoing opiate crisis, and increasing rates of depression and anxiety, especially among young people. To address that, we need to expand access to mental health services. We need to reduce access to lethal means among people of risk, and we need to have programs in schools that address it, that create peer-based models where kids will reach out to other kids if they're considering ending their lives.
All right. Suicide is, you know, yes, it's public health. It's a national crisis. It's also extremely personal. I'm going to start with a personal story here. When I was in college, I went through a period of being very depressed. And I remember thinking to myself, I should just end it. And the deal that I made with myself was, well, I'm young. I'll give it 7 years. If I still feel like this in 7 years, I'm going to kill myself. And the shock, saying those words in my head produced a little bit of a shock in myself, and it spurred me to get help. I was incredibly lucky to be at a college at the time where there was no copay, there was no deductible to go to the health center. I just walked in and somebody talked to me. And I went through 6 months of counseling, and they finally convinced me to try medication. I tried a couple different ones, and it saved my life. Like I probably wouldn't be here if I hadn't had access to those services. And I can't tell you why suicide has increased in the last 20 years. There's lots of reasons. I'm pretty sure that the root causes are hopelessness and pain and despair. And the antidote to that is community, is feeling together, is having hope, and is destigmatizing getting treatment for something that for some people is a biological thing. I still take antidepressants to this day, and I probably will for the rest of my life. And that's okay. I'm a happy, healthy person now. What we can do also is there are smart guns. Do you know most suicides are committed with somebody else's gun? They have smart guns that you can make it so only the owner can have it. So anyways, let's move on to a new era and vote for Sarah.
I love that. Round of applause again for them. So y'all have been doing a wonderful job. We're on amazing time. So what we're going to do though is we're going to bring that microphone to Aunt Andra, and then Mike, I'm gonna have you bring that microphone to Moses, and we're gonna start with Michael again on this question. Actually, we started with you last time, didn't we?
You did, yeah.
All right, so we're gonna actually bring it back to Sarah.
I know
Sorry,
you love
and then bring it back to Mike. My bad. So Moses, we're gonna bring the microphone back to Mike, and then we're gonna start with Sarah. If you could,
Since
go ahead.
I just
Yes.
went, how about we start with Andra and
That
then
works
come out this way?
perfect. That works perfect. And the inside out, because that's how we have to heal our city.
And a good movie, by the way.
Look at us collaborating with each other.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah, for that. We have to do that.
Yeah.
That's a good movie, by the way. Shameless plug, Inside Out.
Yeah. I just did
Watch
that.
it. Adults are involved and children.
And the sequel is in theaters now.
Exactly. All right. And an iPhone near you. All right. If you could fundamentally change anything about our current society, what would you change, and how would that improve our quality of life?
Thank you, Jarrell. So this might be a little bit controversial, but I think if I could just poof one thing, I changed it. I would say no private vehicles. So I know. So I've been looking at models like Whistler in Canada, where they have the whole city is very walkable and everyone parks on the outside of it. And there's just no cars on the inside of the city. So everyone is just walking from business to business, restaurant to restaurant. They get to interact. There's all kinds of stuff going on in the plazas all the time. And I just keep thinking about how wonderful that would be and how much more community centric that would be, how much we would not be dependent on fossil fuels if that were the case, how much more space that would free up. Like if we didn't need residential streets, if we didn't need parking lots and driveways. We are looking at probably serious food insecurity based on all of the bread baskets of the world collapsing at the same time because of climate change in the next 5 years. So we need to get really serious about food security, and we don't have room to grow the food to support our whole population right now. But if we start working really seriously about transitioning streets into greenways and allowing that for space to grow food, we can really make a difference in food security and making sure that we are more self-sufficient than we are right now, because we won't be able to import as much as we used to. I also think about all the markets that we could have, all of the events we could have, how we would just necessarily need to make more walkable communities because we can't drive, or, we have to call a Lyft, or things like that. And I would really look forward to having significantly less pollution and significantly less disease related to pollution, like asthma and other chronic disorders that have been documented as being caused by diesel fuels and other things. So, and in general, I really support the biking community, the pedestrian community, the public transit systems, and I just would, as a government official, really like to shift away from car-centric models.
I hear people say often that our system is broken. I disagree with this statement, not because I think our capitalist system is ethical or that it has the capability of providing prosperity for all of us, but because our system is functioning exactly as intended. You're born into this world and almost immediately fed stories of nationalism and American exceptionalism. You're taught a cherry-picked and white supremacist lens history of our country. You're pushed through grade school and forced to endure mind-numbing courses until you reach the age where you're finally given the ultimatum of going to college or going straight to work. If you go to college, you saddle yourself with tens of thousands of dollars of student loans. If you go to work, you're met with low wages, long hours, and overwhelming rent and bill payments. You could join the military straight out of high school or get your college paid for by joining the ROTC, the Reserve Officer Training Corps. But both of these require putting your life on the line to do what again? To protect our economic interests abroad. If you choose to not participate in this rigged system, stressing yourself out for some green paper and some numbers in your checking account, then you will not be able to make rent. You'll quickly be evicted, you'll be on the streets, fall into despair, and possibly turn to substance to ease the pain. As we've seen recently in our city, you're now liable to get arrested if you live in a tent or are caught using substances in the streets. Once arrested, you face jail time, which along with eviction and houselessness are the key tools of fear the ruling class uses to keep us in line. The law enforcement officers are there to enforce these rules just to make sure we know where we stand. If I could change something about our society, it would be to abolish capitalism. Until we move forward as a race beyond this exploitative system, we will continue to have houselessness, drug addiction, and climate crises. If we identify and dismantle this system, we'll be free to create a more equitable society capable of providing for everyone's material needs. We must end capitalism before it ends us.
All right. Well, I'm getting a little more esoteric here, I guess. But when I was thinking about what I would change about how humans live, I immediately went to time scale. I think we often operate on time scales that aren't really conducive to addressing problems. So for instance, Sarah's story earlier about, when a person's feeling suicidal, moving out of thinking about the moment and taking it on a larger time scale. If we talk about environmental issues, the problems with like future discounting and, I want to talk about arable soil loss. These things all look different when we just shift the time scale. And I think, we see in politics that there's a real problem of only being able to look at 4 or 6 years or however long. And a lot of problems are best addressed at a 10 or a 20-year time scale. I think if we step back far enough, we actually have a lot in common society-wide. If we take a 500-year view, we're almost all hoping for the Star Trek: The Next Generation outcome. It's only when we get caught up in like the moment that these little percentage changes start to feel like serious fights. And when we look back on it after a century or two, all of this is just going to look like inevitable tension during an inevitable change. So I think adjusting to most appropriate timescales, if we could somehow master that as a species, it'd really pay off for all of us.
Thanks for the question. I like challenges, so I picked a big one, and that's ending and bridging the political and cultural divide in this country, this state, and in this community. It's been increasingly pronounced in recent years, including right here in Portland. And I think this change would dramatically improve our quality of life in several ways. Improve civil discourse. We would discuss issues with the dignity that was discussed in the first question and respect for one another as we listen to diverse views. We would have stronger communities. Reducing polarization would help rebuild social bonds within our neighborhoods and within our city. It would increase community engagement, volunteerism, and a stronger sense of shared purpose. We'd even have more effective governance. All you have to do is look at, if you want to look at an example of political divide, city and county, and how they do or do not coordinate on issues like houselessness. It's one argument over another because people on one side or the other or both are not listening to one another and considering the ideas that are being offered by other people that might or might not be better than their own ideas. It would also allow us to address issues like infrastructure issues, education, public health. And finally, exposure to diverse viewpoints in a constructive manner would help people develop greater empathy and understanding for those with different backgrounds and beliefs.
All right. So yeah, esoteric. That's kind of the way I went to. I think if we could change the assumption that we need constant population growth to thrive as a society, that would make a huge difference. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean eliminating capitalism. Maybe it does. It would definitely reform how we think about it if we do keep it. But basically, we need, Earth is close to, or we have passed population carrying capacity. There's the natural tendency to reduce birth rates. We've seen it all over the place. People keep asking why. I'm like, well, look around. Why do you think? We have a choice in this. But if we took away that assumption, instead of saying we have to have more people, we have to keep growing, we could say, hey, how do we thrive? How do we make enough for everybody with what we have? Why can't we, I don't know, like, why can't we just be happy with what we have? Why can't we make it so everybody has enough without increasing our population? So I think just eliminating that barrier will open up people's mindsets and we'll come up with creative new solutions, and we can live and prosper and be happy together. This is kind of like a fundamental tenet of sustainability. It's not that you stay the same. You continue to grow and evolve and change, but you do it in a sustainable way. So it's a new era. Vote for Sarah.
Love it.
All right. So if I could change something, I think I'm going to go big picture here as well. I've spent the better part of my career focused on learning about and working in media and broadcasting. And, I love how the advent of technology over the past 20 plus years has done a lot to bring us together. Being able to video phone and chat with friends and family, around the country and around the world has really brought us to a hyper local level in this big world and big planet that we live on. And this is all good. But the advent of technology has done a lot in our polarization and actually taking us away from each other and really connecting on a human level. And there's that pattern we're talking about. Dignity is about seeing each other on a human level. So, if I could go big picture and take all of the knowledge that we have now, but go backward 25 years and start the technology roller coaster over again, so that we can see how it's actually been a tool of manipulation for all of us. And it's done a really great job of being a tool at dividing us. And, I think we all have the ability to see it for what it is, move forward, and find ways to understand that there's a lot that we're going to disagree about and may never come to consensus on. But let's put some of that aside and start working on the things that we know that we do agree on, and start rebuilding and working on improving our society for all of us on the things that we do agree on. So technology is wonderful, but it's also been a tool for dividing us. I think we need to move forward knowing what we know now.
So at first I hated this question, and then I loved the question. I've lived and worked in a lot of different countries around the world, and most of them have been either in the midst of or recovering from some kind of crisis or violent conflict. And every country I've been in has been different, but there has been one theme in every place I have been, and that is persistent and systemic marginalization, exclusion, and oppression. And so if I could change one thing about our society, I would rid the world of exclusion and oppression, because it not only is it morally right, but marginalization is the biggest threat to the stability of our society. I lived in Nigeria during the height of the Boko Haram crisis, and Boko Haram was a violent extremist group really ravaging the northeast of the country. And when I first got there, one of the things we wanted to discover was why what is appealing about this group? Why are people joining it? So we hired a local research firm to ask people in the group that question. And what we heard back from them was the government is corrupt, the religious leaders are corrupt, the community leaders are corrupt, we have no future in this system, and the only answer is to burn it down. And that is the end of oppression and marginalization and exclusion. When the system doesn't work for people, when their voices aren't heard, when their participation is not rewarded, they will find a way to make their voices heard. And it's not going to be through democratic processes like voting or showing up at town halls. The end game of oppression is coups and war and terrorism. And Portland is not a war zone, but I've seen these dynamics at work here. We know the racist history of our city and our state. We know how they have systemically destroyed historic Black communities like Albina and Vanport. And I really believe that charter reform is part of the answer because it's designed to be more accountable and responsive. And I want to be a part of making that happen because it's right, but it's also what our city needs for its stability.
I think there might be one more wish in this genie's bottle here. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, if we could just flip the switch on one thing, I think for me it'd be removing the billionaires who have a vested interest in kind of validating the existing capital structures, cost structures, markets, whatever you have them that require the ongoing fossil fuel infrastructure that is ultimately ruining our planet. And that is getting in the way of the very rapid scale of deployment that we need to do to even catch up to maybe the second or third best case scenario. So that would be the kind of utopian vision, but we don't live in that world, right? And so I think what I'd like to offer here while I've got the mic is that as desperate as we all feel, as kind of sort of bleak as it all seems out there, I'm looking at folks who are here on a Saturday. It seems kind of nice outside, and you want to listen to see how we might think about changing some things. And so that tells me there's organizing capacity in this city. There's organizing capacity in Oregon, and there's still some hope that we can change some things. And so I think there's a lot of people in Portland. There's a narrative that says, "Oh, everyone's given up on Portland. Oh, Portland is a dumpster fire." I reject that. I'm looking at hope here, and I think what we need to do is say, look, let's build the administrative capacity we need to build to execute on the mission that we have, which is, go big on climate, go big on affordable housing, build walkable cities, and kind of heal our community, because that's what's going to save us, right? It's going to be us participating on a daily basis, using the technology that we already know how to do, by the way. We don't need to wait for future technology to save us. We have it right now. We don't need to create new financial instruments to finance it. We have it right now. We just need to get ourselves organized. Thanks.
I want to share a story with everyone. Back in the early 2000s, I used to be a beer man. I would work at the Rose Garden and at Civic Stadium, and I would sell beer. Get your beer here, ice cold beer. And I'd walk up and down the stadium stairs, right? And I'd sell beer. So I was working at the Rose Garden one day, working at a Blazer game. And I'm down there by the court. And just that year, I had started to get involved. This is 2003. I started to get actively involved in the Democratic Party here in the county level, at the Multnomah County Democratic Party, as an activist. And I'm working, I'm sweating, I'm just sweating, and I'm selling beer, I'm schlepping beer. And I'm down there by courtside, and who of all people, Congresswoman Darlene Hooley recognized me, stood up, "Moses, hi." She waved at me, and I'm sweating and everything, and she treated me with dignity and respect. And to this day, that left a huge impression on me about what leadership is all about. So, because it relates to having empathy for all people in all positions, listening, learning, what are they coming from, having that fundamental respect for all parts of our society. And I learned it from Congresswoman Darlene Hooley that day, because she gave it to me. My goal here was be to that if we could have empathy for all, understanding of all. It's a fundamental thing, but it has to be start from the top. And as your city councilman, you will have my respect and empathy. Thank you.
Well, if I could change one thing about society, it would be the abolishment of our two-party system. It is not working. It has not worked for decades, and it is failing us miserably. All it does is it pits us against each other, and we become vicious with each other. We troll each other. We call each other names, bully each other, and it is a very destructive system. And one thing I'm loving about this new charter system is that we are all here running as non-partisans. We're not running as Democrats. We're not running as Republicans, as independents, Greens, what have you. We're all non-partisan, running on the issues. We need to return to a time when candidates ran on the issues, not on how much money they could raise, they could be endorsed by, where we can actually meet with candidates, voters like you, who are taking the time out of this beautiful day when you could be out on the food market, but you're here with us. And I cannot thank you guys for showing up here. And if we can return civility back to our political discourse, so much can happen where we can actually talk about our issues. We all have 10 different agendas here, but we all agree that we need to get there somehow. And the way we do it is we actually ask for your participation, your input, because we can't really know what's going to happen unless you tell us, what do you want the new city hall to do for you? What can we do to help you? I may not be able to give you a hand, but I can push through a lot of progressive initiatives that can become city ordinances, like universal healthcare, universal education, universal housing. So these are all issues that a lot of cities across Europe and even countries in the European Union are already doing. Why can't we do it here in Portland? And this November, I ask you to please vote for me, Michael Trimble, as one of your top 3 candidates for city council. Thank you.
Round of applause.
Yeah.
That was
Thank you.
a remarkable experience. Wouldn't you all agree?
Yes.
Thank you. So without further ado, we do still have a little bit of time. We're going to get them out of their seats and they're going to intermingle with everyone here that's still here. And there's a lot of food.
What about questions from the audience?
Do we have time for that? For questions from the audience? We don't have time for that, do we?
We're gonna do like a meet and greet.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna do a meet and greet. You'll be able to meet all the candidates when they get out there. But I want you all to recognize that we are also a part of the small donor elections program, and each of these candidates, with the exception of maybe a few, are not accepting money. But those that are, every $5 that's donated to their campaign is matched 9-to-1 by the city. And if you have $45, you could possibly help them all. Obviously, District 4 is doing a wonderful job, as you can see, for the collaborative effort of making this city a better place. Without further ado, intermingle. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate y'all. Look forward to doing this again.
Yes. And thank you for hosting us. Yes. Oh, you know me.
I know you. I mean,
Always fighting in my disability. Yes, yes. I almost used the joke with the ace up my sleeve. I thought I said it one day. I'm the only candidate who can do that. So run with it.
Oh, run with it. No pun intended.
Exactly, yes. And if I fall, you can catch me. Because I won't be catching myself. Ever.
Yeah, I wanted it to be a little more.
Yes.